Okay, this one takes the cake for my favorite version of Victoria 3 so far. An alternative start that reminds me, probably like you, a lot of Paradox's other grand strategy games. Let's take Crusader Kings 3 for example, where we have the 867 versus the 1066 start. We could look at almost any of their other games and find the same. Victoria 3, if you don't know, usually starts in 1836, but today we're jumping back in time and also in a slightly different version of history, 100 years earlier. And if you take a look at the map, like me, you'll probably notice straight away that a few key things have changed. Basically, every single great power is different except for Great Britain, which sits there as its isolated collection of red rocks and doesn't really offer much different. But as you can see by the rest, they absolutely do. France, replaced by the Holy Roman Empire. France, we say adios. The Commonwealth of Poland, Lithuania, etc., massive in the middle. And then, of course, there are other great powers that are completely new out of nowhere or missing entirely. Russia is Muscovy, and that's about it, with the golden hordes stretching across the Asian steppes instead. And then, of course, here we have Basileia Romaíon, the alternative what if factor to the Roman Empire. What if the Roman Empire stood in the east and continued to influence the world around it? And that is what this mod for Victoria 3 asks and delivers. And I have to say, we've looked at a few mods so far on the channel, and this one has completely blown me away. So as I look across the map here and survey the completely different geopolitical environment that you can play in, right? The Golden Horde, ladies and gentlemen, is now a major power. And as you can see, there are also a load of interesting puppet, satellite, etc. relationships taking place here. The Persian Empire looking massive, Great Qing, massive. And then much smaller, more interesting powers in Europe, as I mentioned earlier, like Muscovy. But hold on, Jumbo, what the heck is going on here? All right, let's get some context. And just quickly before we do, if you wouldn't mind subscribing, I know it's a pain, sorry to ask, but we are getting close to 50,000 subscribers, and thank you to everybody who's joined me on this crazy journey so far. But let's jump straight back in, and here it is inserted handily at the top of your screen for your viewing pleasure. The basis of this mod, this is the Basileia Romaion mod, Roman Empire in medieval Greek, and the premise is as follows. What if the Roman Empire never ended in the east? Retaining Anatolia and Greece and regaining control over other areas like the Balkans and Egypt, northeastern Africa, for example. What if their influence, the Greek-speaking Eastern Roman influence over the world, not just their own nation, but also throughout Europe and Asia, Africa, and the New World, continued? And that's exactly what this delivers. It's a new alternative history scenario in Victoria 3. And as you can see, as I look across the map, the most significant change that it delivers, although there are some more as well, including gameplay tweaks, performance, we'll get to those in a bit, is of course the change to the map. Look at all of these new playable nations, from minor unrecognized powers, of course, to major global powers like the Holy Roman Empire, or maybe you want to play as New France over here in the Americas. There is something for everybody, but also in every corner of the globe. Of course, there's more sort of New World as well, more territories to colonize. But then as I delve in here, playing as the Commonwealth, there is a massive amount of playability buried in Europe, but also, as we'll look at a little bit later in the video, in Asia as well, and other parts of the world that are maybe not quite as playable in the standard version of Victoria 3. So then, what does this mod, in its infancy, currently version 0.14, deliver outside of this cool change to the map and all of these playable nations? Well, as you can see from the tech tree, some other scaling has been done to accomplish trying to bring in all of these new nations in a minus 100 year on the calendar and actually have it work properly in Vic 3. Starting from the top, obviously this is a new alternate history scenario, and it provides an earlier start date, 100 years earlier, which gives you an extra 100 years of playing time as well. Outside of the new history and nations and blah blah blah, you just get to play Vic 3 for longer, which might interest you above all else. More importantly though, of course, all of the nations have had their literacy adjusted alongside their technology and buildings to fit with the slightly earlier time frame. And you'll get a look at that, particularly as we move through the video and I bounce around some perspective of a few different nations. But again, more on that in a little bit. There are a whole load of new nations. Obviously, the Eastern Roman Empire, the Holy Roman Empire, but also other massive major players that we've already been introduced to in the gameplay on screen, like Hungary, of course, the Commonwealth, but around the world, loads of massive ones. Mali, Ethiopia, of course, the Golden Horde stretching across the Asian steppes. There are loads of nations to play. And as I look at the list, there's actually quite literally too much to go through, but there's a lot of nuance and history here in this alternate history scenario. And that's one of the things that I want to stress the most. But outside of that, outside of the tweaking and the balancing and adding all of the new nations, there's more where that came from, under the hood. Things you might not notice straight away, but add to the overall experience of what is a fantastic mod for Victoria 3. And there's so much to unpack. In fact, here it comes right now, smacking you in the face and appearing at the front of your screen before slowly fading away down to the bottom right. And you can see that it's all about flavor, historical flavor, flair in this alternate history scenario. Of course, there are gameplay features like new journal entries, decisions, events, and then sitting underneath those, there are new cultures and religions added into the game. These, of course, support the new nations in this alternate history scenario. They would have to be there to have it work well, but man, they're implemented brilliantly. And we'll take a look at the culture map toward the end of the video here as I start to transition and look at some different nations. Here, Ethiopia, one of the major players alongside Mali and of course Sokoto that we know and love. Moving across to Asia, and this is a great power fest like there's no tomorrow, with the Mughal Empire in India having a really firm grasp over the opium plantations, among many other things. But of course, coming into conflict with the Persian Empire filled with subjects like Khiva, Great Qing, and the Mongol horde. Potentially in future, of course, a rising Muscovy as well. This is a real hotbed and an interesting place to play, and you can see the new nations and cultures really cultivated there. Moreover, though, there are also unique techs, modifiers, and traits added with this mod, and some really cool new monuments. More on those in a moment though, because before that, I want to touch on the more sort of governance and the geopolitical side of things. Here we have new subject types and new government types like merchant republics, khanates, caliphates, and more. New ruler titles come along as well, loads of wonderful ones, including Khan and Doge. And also, some sort of more historical flair, we can see new ruler titles. Anatolia, Greece, the Balkans use their medieval Greek names, and so much more. Subjects themselves can also engage in diplomacy in this version. And here you can see some more unique flair, some of the new monuments added into the game, like the Hippodrome, for example. Others that have been added in newly include the Great Palace, the Senate, and so on and so forth. And all of these things, whether it's the new monuments, the titles, or some of the practical things that actually play out in-game, like the new nations, obviously, the culture map, of course, but also some of those less flashy but really significant things like the events help to build a rich world. It's not just a spreadsheet simulator because we have all of these other wonderful additions to go along with it. And here, of course, I'm playing as perhaps the greatest great power, the mod literally named after me, sitting right at the center of the world. And I feel like I've barely even scratched the surface yet. As we start to look at sort of different lenses and views, Muscovy up into the north, the Commonwealth, of course, that we looked at the start of the video, and then zoom in on the Holy Roman Empire itself. I hope that you also start to get a feel for the kind of nuance that this could deliver. If you enjoy Victoria 3, you'll probably enjoy this mod too. Particularly if, like me, you like to dabble in some of the other strategy games that Paradox or others put out, like EU4, Crusader Kings. Those two really come to mind. I mean, obviously Hearts of Iron as well, and many others. As I zoom across this culture map, and I reflect on that 100-year earlier starting position, I think this is a really neat way to play it. Would we ever see this kind of thing in the real game? Well, it's Victoria, it's based on the Victorian era, and this is quite considerably pulling us away from that. So it seems kind of unlikely to get this scenario, and that is the beauty of modding. Thank you to the creators of the mod, and thank you for watching this video. I'll see you next time. Maybe even with a playthrough of this, because this is very cool.